He came in every night at 7. Same time. Same routine. Same gray uniform with his name stitched on the pocket. Most people in the building didn't even know his name. To them, he was just the janitor, the guy who emptied their trash cans, the man who mopped the floors after everyone went home. He was invisible. And honestly, after 12 years of doing this job, he had gotten used to it. His name was Raymond, but everyone just called him Ray. Ray worked at one of the biggest tech companies in the city, the kind of place with glass walls and fancy coffee machines on every floor. The kind of place where people wore expensive suits and talked about millions of dollars like it was nothing. He didn't belong in that world. He knew it. They knew it. But he showed up anyway, night after night, because he had a reason to keep going. Her name was Chloe, his daughter. She was 15 years old, and the only good thing left in his life. See, Ray wasn't always a janitor. There was a time when his life looked very different. 20 years ago, he was a student at one of the best music schools in the country. Piano was his thing. He could play in a way that made people stop and listen. His teachers said he had a gift. They said he could go far. And for a while, he believed them. But life has a funny way of changing your plans. He met a woman named Grace during his second year. She had a laugh that could light up a room, and a smile that made him forget about everything else. They fell in love fast, got married young, and when Grace told him she was pregnant, Ray felt like the luckiest man alive. But then things started to fall apart. Grace got sick during the pregnancy. The doctors said it was serious. Ray dropped out of school to take care of her. He picked up odd jobs to pay the medical bills. He told himself it was temporary. Once she got better, he would go back to music. He would finish what he started. Grace held on long enough to see their daughter born. She held Chloe in her arms for 3 beautiful days. And then, she was gone. Ray never went back to music after that. He couldn't. Every time he sat down at a piano, he thought of her. The songs they used to sing together. The dreams they used to share. It hurt too much, so he closed that chapter of his life and focused on the only thing that mattered. Raising his little girl. The years passed quickly. Chloe grew up. Ray got older. He took the janitor job because the hours were steady and the pay was enough to keep a roof over their heads. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work, and Ray never complained. He just kept his head down and did what needed to be done. But sometimes, late at night, when the building was empty and quiet, Ray would walk past the executive floor and see something that made his heart ache. A piano. It sat in the corner of the big conference room on the top floor. A beautiful grand piano, black and shiny, like something out of a dream. Ray had seen it dozens of times. Maybe hundreds, but he never touched it. He told himself it wasn't his place. He was just the cleaning guy. That piano was for important people, not for him. One night, everything changed. It was a Thursday. Ray remembered because Thursdays were usually quiet. Most of the executives left early for the weekend. The building was almost empty by the time he started his shift. He did his usual rounds, cleaned the bathrooms, emptied the trash, mopped the lobby. Then he made his way up to the top floor. The conference room was dark when he walked in. He flipped on the lights and started wiping down the long table in the center of the room. That's when he saw it again. The piano, just sitting there in the corner, covered in a thin layer of dust. Something felt different that night. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was the loneliness. Or maybe it was just the weight of all those years, finally catching up to him. Whatever it was, Ray found himself walking toward the piano before he even realized what he was doing. He stood in front of it for a long time. His hands were shaking. He hadn't touched a piano in almost 16 years. What if he had forgotten how to play? What if the music was gone? He sat down on the bench. Slowly. Carefully. Like he was afraid the piano might disappear if he moved too fast. His fingers hovered over the keys, and then he played. It started soft. Just a few notes. Testing the waters. But then, something clicked inside him. The music came rushing back like a wave he couldn't stop. His fingers moved on their own, dancing across the keys like they had never stopped. The sound filled the room. It bounced off the glass walls and echoed through the empty hallways. Ray played a song he had written a long time ago, a lullaby. He wrote it for Chloe when she was just a baby. It was the last song he ever composed. The melody was sad but beautiful, full of love and loss and everything in between. For those few minutes, Ray forgot where he was. He forgot about the mop and the bucket waiting for him in the hallway. He forgot about the bills and the long nights and the years of being invisible. He was just a man playing piano, nothing more, nothing less. When the song ended, Ray sat there in the silence. His eyes were wet. He wiped them quickly and stood up from the bench. He felt lighter somehow, like he had let go of something heavy that he had been carrying for too long. He didn't know that someone was watching. High up in the corner of the room, a small red light blinked quietly. A security camera. It had recorded everything. Every note. Every tear. Every second of his private moment. And the footage was about to land in the hands of the worst possible person. His name was Mr. Vernon, the CEO of the company. A man who had everything and still wanted more. He was rich, powerful, and he had an ego the size of a mountain. People feared him because he enjoyed making others feel small. It made him feel big. Mr. Vernon was at home that night, scrolling through security footage on his phone. He liked to keep an eye on things, even when he wasn't in the office. That's when he saw it. The janitor, sitting at his piano, playing like some kind of concert performer. At first, Mr. Vernon laughed. He thought it was the funniest thing he had seen all week. The cleaning guy thought he was talented. How pathetic. But then something shifted in his expression. He watched the video again. And again. The more he watched, the less he laughed. Because deep down, in a place he would never admit existed, Mr. Vernon recognized something in that performance. Real talent. And that made him angry. Mr. Vernon didn't like being outdone. He didn't like the idea that some janitor might be better than him at anything. Especially piano. You see, Mr. Vernon fancied himself a musician. He had taken lessons for years. He played at every company event and expected applause every single time. It was his thing, his spotlight, and now some nobody in a gray uniform was threatening to take that away from him. Mr. Vernon smiled to himself as a plan began to form in his mind. He was going to teach this janitor a lesson he would never forget. Ray had no idea what was coming. He finished his shift that night feeling peaceful for the first time in years. He went home, kissed his daughter goodnight, and fell asleep, thinking about the music. He had no clue that by tomorrow evening, his whole life was about to change. The next morning started like any other for Ray. He woke up early, made breakfast for Chloe, watched her leave for school with her backpack bouncing on her shoulders. Then he went back to bed for a few hours, because working nights meant sleeping during the day. When he woke up again around noon, he had a strange feeling in his chest. Like something was off. He couldn't explain it. Maybe it was just nerves from the night before. Playing that piano had stirred up a lot of old memories, a lot of old feelings. He figured his mind just needed time to settle down. He had no idea what was waiting for him at work. Ray arrived at the building that evening at his usual time, 7 o'clock. He swiped his badge at the security desk and headed toward the supply closet to grab his cart. But before he could get there, one of the security guards stopped him. "Hey Ray," the guard said. "You need to go to the main auditorium, right now." Ray blinked. The auditorium? Why? Did something happen? The guard shrugged. "I don't know, man. I just got a call from upstairs. They said to send you over as soon as you clocked in." Ray felt his stomach drop. This couldn't be good. In 12 years of working here, no one had ever asked him to go to the auditorium. That place was for company meetings and big events, not for janitors. He tried to think of what he might have done wrong. Maybe he missed a spot somewhere. Maybe someone complained about him. Or maybe they found out about the piano. His heart started beating faster as he walked through the building. The hallways felt longer than usual. His footsteps echoed on the marble floors. When he finally reached the auditorium doors, he paused for a moment and took a deep breath. Then he pushed them open. The first thing he saw was the crowd. Hundreds of people, maybe 500 or more. They were sitting in rows of seats that stretched all the way to the back of the room. The stage was lit up with bright lights. There was a microphone stand in the center. And music. Someone was playing music. Ray realized what was happening. It was the company's annual talent show. He had heard about it before, but never attended. It was always held during his shift, and janitors weren't exactly invited to these kinds of events. So why was he here now? He spotted a familiar face near the back of the room. It was Linda, one of the receptionists. She was the only person in the building who ever really talked to him. She waved him over with a worried look on her face. "Ray," she whispered when he reached her. "I don't know what's going on, but Mr. Vernon has been talking about you all day. He made everyone stay late for this. Something's not right." Before Ray could respond, a voice boomed through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special surprise for you tonight." Ray looked up at the stage. There he was, Mr. Vernon, standing behind the microphone with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He was wearing an expensive suit and holding a tablet in his hand. "Most of you know me as your CEO, Mr. Vernon continued. But tonight, I want to introduce you to someone else. Someone you see every day but probably never notice. Someone who has been hiding a little secret from all of us." The crowd murmured. People started looking around, confused. Mr. Vernon tapped the tablet screen, and the giant display behind him lit up. Ray's blood ran cold. It was the security footage from last night. Him sitting at the piano, playing his heart out in what he thought was an empty room. The video played for everyone to see. The sound of his music filled the auditorium. But people weren't listening with admiration. They were laughing, whispering, pointing at the screen. "Our janitor thinks he's a concert pianist," Mr. Vernon said into the microphone. His voice dripped with amusement. "Look at him. Sitting at my piano, like he owns the place. Isn't that adorable?" More laughter, scattered applause. Ray wanted to disappear. He wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole. His face burned with shame. He could feel hundreds of eyes turning to find him in the crowd. Someone pointed. Someone laughed louder. But Mr. Vernon wasn't finished. "Now, I don't want to be unfair," the CEO said, holding up his hands like he was being generous. "Maybe our cleaning friend here really does have some talent. So I thought, why not give him a chance to prove it?" He gestured toward the side of the stage, where two grand pianos now sat side by side. "I'm inviting our janitor to come up here and play against me. A little friendly competition. Let's see if the man who mops our floors can outplay the man who runs this company." The crowd erupted. Some people cheered. Others clapped. A few looked uncomfortable, like they knew this was wrong but were too afraid to say anything. Ray stood frozen in the back of the room. His legs felt like concrete. His hands were shaking. Every instinct in his body told him to turn around and walk out. To quit this job and never come back. He didn't need this humiliation. He didn't deserve it. But then he heard a voice, a small voice, coming from somewhere to his right. "Dad?" Ray turned his head. And there she was. Chloe, his daughter, standing in the aisle with wide eyes and a confused expression. She wasn't supposed to be here. How did she get here? Later, Ray would find out that Linda had called Chloe. She thought it would be a nice surprise for Ray to have his daughter watch him perform. She had no idea what Mr. Vernon was planning. She never would have done it if she knew. But right now, none of that mattered. All Ray could see was his little girl. The one he had sacrificed everything for. The one who believed in him even when he didn't believe in himself. Chloe's eyes were shining with tears. Not because she was embarrassed. Not because she was ashamed of her father. But because she could see how much pain he was in. And it broke her heart. She didn't say anything else. She just looked at him. And then, slowly, she nodded. It was a small gesture, barely noticeable. But Ray understood exactly what it meant. Go up there. Show them who you really are. Ray took a breath. Then another. The voices in his head were screaming at him to run. But his feet had other plans. They started moving. One step at a time. Toward the stage, the crowd went quiet as they watched the janitor walk down the center aisle. His gray uniform looked out of place under the bright lights. His shoes squeaked softly on the polished floor. He didn't look at anyone. He just kept walking. When he reached the stage, he climbed the steps slowly. Mr. Vernon was grinning like a cat who had just caught a mouse. Well, the CEO said. Our brave janitor decided to accept the challenge. Let's give him a round of applause for his courage. The applause was thin, mocking. Some people snickered. Ray walked past Mr. Vernon without saying a word. He sat down at one of the pianos, the same kind of piano he had played the night before. His fingers rested on the edge of the keys. Mr. Vernon sat down at the other piano. I'll go first, he announced. Watch and learn, my friend. The CEO cracked his knuckles dramatically and began to play. It was a classical piece. Something complicated and fancy. His fingers moved quickly across the keys. He swayed his body for effect. He closed his eyes like he was lost in the music. When he finished, the crowd applauded loudly. Mr. Vernon stood up and took a bow. He looked at Ray with a smug expression that said, "Beat that." Ray didn't move. He just sat there, staring at the keys. The room fell silent again. People started to whisper. Some of them thought he had frozen up. Some thought he was going to cry, but Ray wasn't scared anymore. He was remembering. He was remembering Grace. Her smile, her laugh, the way she used to sit beside him while he played. He was remembering all the dreams they had shared, all the love they had built, all the sacrifices he had made, and he was remembering why he used to play in the first place. Not for applause, not for approval, but because music was the only way he knew how to say the things words couldn't express. Ray closed his eyes. His fingers found the keys, and then he began to play. The first note was soft. So soft that people in the back rows had to lean forward to hear it. Some of them thought maybe Ray had made a mistake. Maybe he hit the wrong key. Maybe he was already falling apart. But then came the second note. And the third. And slowly, something beautiful began to take shape. Ray wasn't playing a fancy classical piece like Mr. Vernon had. He wasn't trying to show off or impress anyone with speed or technique. He was playing something else entirely. Something real. Something that came from a place so deep inside him that even he had forgotten it existed. It was the lullaby. The one he wrote for Chloe when she was just a baby. The one he used to play for Grace when she was sick in the hospital. The one he hadn't touched in 16 years because it hurt too much to remember. But now, sitting on that stage with hundreds of eyes watching him, Ray finally let himself remember. The melody started slow and gentle, like a whisper, like a secret being shared between two people who loved each other more than words could say. His fingers moved across the keys like water flowing over stones. There was no hesitation, no fear, just music. In the audience, people stopped whispering. The smiles faded from their faces. The laughter died in their throats. Something was happening on that stage. Something none of them had expected. Ray played with his eyes closed. He wasn't in the auditorium anymore. He was somewhere else. Somewhere far away. He was back in that tiny apartment where he and Grace had lived when they first got married. He could smell her perfume. He could hear her voice. He could feel her hand on his shoulder as she listened to him play. The music grew stronger. The notes began to climb. There was sadness in every chord. But there was also love. So much love that it filled the room like sunlight breaking through clouds. A woman in the third row wiped her eyes. She didn't even know why she was crying. She had never met Ray before. She didn't know his story. But something about the music reached inside her and touched a wound she thought had healed a long time ago. She wasn't the only one. All around the auditorium, people were feeling things they couldn't explain. Some of them thought about loved ones they had lost. Some thought about dreams they had given up. Some thought about mistakes they had made and words they never got to say. That's the thing about real music. It doesn't just entertain you. It finds the part of you that you've been hiding from the world. And it holds it up to the light. Ray kept playing. The melody shifted. It became more hopeful now. Like the sun rising after a long night. Like a father holding his newborn daughter for the first time. Like a man finding the strength to keep going even when everything inside him wanted to give up. He thought about Chloe. All those years of working double shifts. All those nights of coming home exhausted but still helping her with homework. All those birthdays where he couldn't afford much but made sure she knew she was loved. He thought about the sacrifices. The dreams he buried so she could have a better life. The music he walked away from because being her father was more important than being a musician. And he realized something. Something he had never understood until this very moment. He hadn't given up his gift. He had just been saving it, waiting for the right moment to let it out again. This was that moment. The final part of the song was the most beautiful. The notes rang out clear and pure. They hung in the air like stars in a night sky. Ray poured everything he had into those last few measures. All the pain, all the love, all the years of being invisible. And then it was over. The last note faded into silence. Ray sat completely still, his hands resting on the keys. His eyes were still closed. A single tear rolled down his cheek. For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The auditorium was frozen in time. Then a sound broke the silence. It was clapping. Just one person at first. Coming from somewhere near the back of the room. Ray opened his eyes and looked out into the audience. It was Chloe. His daughter was standing up, clapping with tears streaming down her face. She was smiling through her tears, smiling like she had never been more proud of anyone in her entire life. One by one, other people started to join her. A man in the middle section stood up. Then a woman near the front. Then another. And another. Within seconds, the entire auditorium was on its feet. The applause was deafening. It wasn't polite clapping like what Mr. Vernon had received. It was real. Raw. The kind of applause that comes from the heart. People were cheering. Some were crying openly. Others were shaking their heads in disbelief, wondering how they had walked past this man for years without ever knowing what he was capable of. Ray sat on that piano bench, overwhelmed. He didn't know what to do. He had never experienced anything like this before. Not even back in music school. When his teachers said he had a gift. This was different. This wasn't about impressing judges or winning competitions. This was about connecting with people, reaching them in a way that nothing else could. He looked over at Mr. Vernon. The CEO was still sitting at his piano. But he wasn't smiling anymore. His face had gone pale. His hands were gripping the edge of the bench so hard that his knuckles had turned white. He looked like a man who had just been punched in the stomach. For the first time in his career, Mr. Vernon had been outdone. And not by some rival executive or competing company. By the janitor. The man who cleaned his office. The man he had tried to humiliate in front of everyone. Mr. Vernon grabbed the microphone and stood up quickly. He tried to say something. Tried to take control of the moment. But his voice was drowned out by the applause. Nobody was listening to him. Nobody was even looking at him. All eyes were on Ray. The CEO's face twisted with anger. He wasn't used to being ignored. He wasn't used to being second best. His whole life, he had been the smartest person in the room, the most successful, the most talented. That's what he believed. That's what he needed to believe. But tonight, a man in a gray uniform had shattered that illusion. Mr. Vernon slammed the microphone back into the stand and walked off the stage without another word. A few people noticed. Most didn't. They were too busy applauding the janitor who had just given the performance of a lifetime. Ray finally stood up from the bench. His legs felt weak. His heart was pounding. He gave a small, awkward bow, because he didn't know what else to do. The applause got even louder. Then he walked off the stage and straight toward his daughter. Chloe ran to meet him. She threw her arms around him and held on tight. She was crying and laughing at the same time. "Dad," she whispered into his ear. That was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. Ray hugged her back. He couldn't speak. There were no words for what he was feeling. 16 years of silence. 16 years of hiding. And now, finally, he had found his voice again. People started coming up to him. Strangers. Co-workers. People who had never said a single word to him before. They shook his hand. They patted him on the back. They told him how amazing he was, how moved they were, how they had no idea. Ray thanked them all quietly. He wasn't used to the attention. Part of him still wanted to disappear back into the shadows where it was safe. But another part of him, a part that had been sleeping for a very long time, was finally waking up. As the crowd slowly cleared out, Ray noticed Linda standing near the door. She had tears in her eyes too. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I had no idea what Mr. Vernon was planning. I never would have called Chloe if I knew." Ray shook his head. "Don't apologize. If she wasn't here, I never would have gone up on that stage." Linda smiled. "You were incredible, Ray. Truly." He thanked her and walked out of the auditorium with his arm around Chloe. The night air was cool against his face. The stars were bright above him. For the first time in 16 years, Ray felt like himself again. But he had no idea that this was just the beginning. Because somewhere in that auditorium, a young intern had recorded his entire performance on her phone, and by tomorrow morning, the whole world was going to see it. Ray woke up the next morning feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Real peace. The kind that settles deep in your bones and makes you feel like maybe everything is going to be okay. He made breakfast for Chloe like he always did, eggs and toast, her favorite. She came into the kitchen with a big smile on her face and hugged him before sitting down. "I still can't believe last night was real," she said. "Dad, you were amazing. Like, actually amazing." Ray smiled and poured her some orange juice. "I'm just glad it's over. Maybe now things can go back to normal." But things were not going back to normal. Not even close. Around noon, Ray's phone started buzzing. He didn't recognize the numbers. He ignored the first few calls because he figured they were spam. But they kept coming. Call after call after call. Finally, he answered one. "Is this Raymond?" a woman's voice asked. "The janitor from the video?" Ray frowned. "What video?" There was a pause on the other end. "You don't know?" "Sir, you're all over the internet right now. The video of you playing piano has over 2 million views. And it's still climbing." Ray almost dropped the phone. He hung up and immediately went to his laptop. His hands were shaking as he typed in a search. And there it was. Right on the front page of every major social media platform. A video titled, "Janitor Destroys Arrogant CEO in Piano Battle." 2 million views. 3 million now. The number kept jumping every time he refreshed the page. Ray watched the video with his mouth hanging open. The footage was shaky, clearly recorded on someone's phone from the audience. But the audio was clear. You could hear every note he played. You could hear the silence of the crowd. You could hear the explosion of applause at the end. And you could see Mr. Vernon's face when he realized he had lost. The comments section was flooded with thousands of messages. People from all over the world were sharing the video. They were calling Ray a hero. They were calling Mr. Vernon a bully. Some people were even crying in their comments, saying the music had touched them in ways they couldn't explain. Ray sat back in his chair, completely overwhelmed. He had no idea how to process any of this. His phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Linda. "Have you seen the news? You're famous, Ray. Everyone's talking about you." Before he could respond, another message came in. Then another. Then another. People he hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly reaching out. Old classmates from music school. Distant relatives. Even some of his former teachers. The world had finally noticed him, but not everyone was happy about it. That evening, Ray went to work like he always did. He figured no matter what happened online, he still had a job to do. Bills didn't pay themselves. Chloe's college fund wasn't going to fill itself. But the moment he walked into the building, he knew something was wrong. His supervisor was waiting for him at the security desk. The man looked uncomfortable, like he didn't want to be there. "Ray," he said quietly, "I need to talk to you. Orders from upstairs." Ray's stomach tightened. "What kind of orders?" The supervisor handed him a new schedule. Ray looked at it and felt his heart sink. He had been reassigned. No more regular shifts. No more steady hours. Instead, he was now working the worst possible times. Overnight weekends. Holiday shifts. The jobs nobody else wanted. And that wasn't all. Over the next few days, Ray started getting written up for things that made no sense. A trash can he supposedly missed. A bathroom he allegedly didn't clean properly. A window with a smudge that no one could actually find. It was obvious what was happening. Mr. Vernon was punishing him. The CEO couldn't fire Ray directly. That would look too suspicious, especially with all the attention the video was getting. So instead, he was making Ray's life miserable, hoping he would quit on his own. Ray didn't quit. He kept his head down and did his job. But it was hard. Every shift felt like walking through a minefield. Every day brought some new complaint or warning. Meanwhile, the video kept spreading. By the end of the first week, it had over 15 million views. News outlets started picking up the story. A local TV station ran a segment called "The Janitor Who Silenced a CEO." A national morning show mentioned it in their opening monologue. Someone even made a remix of Ray's performance and posted it online. The narrative was clear. Ray was the underdog hero. Mr. Vernon was the villain. And people loved it. Employees at the company started treating Ray differently. Not in a bad way. In a good way. People who had ignored him for years were suddenly saying hello, leaving thank you notes in his cleaning cart, bringing him coffee during his breaks. One night, a young woman approached him in the hallway. Ray recognized her. She was the intern who had recorded the video. "I hope you're not mad at me," she said nervously. "I didn't mean for it to blow up like this. I just thought people should see the truth." Ray shook his head. "I'm not mad. You didn't do anything wrong." She smiled with relief. "For what it's worth, I think what Mr. Vernon did was horrible. A lot of us do. We're just too scared to say anything." Ray understood. He had been scared too. For 12 years, he had kept his head down because he was afraid of losing his job, afraid of making waves, afraid of being noticed. But now he had been noticed, and there was no going back. A few days later, something unexpected happened. Ray received an email from a man named David Chen. The name didn't mean anything to him at first. But when he read the message, his jaw dropped. David Chen was a music producer. A famous one. He had worked with some of the biggest artists in the world. And he had seen Ray's video. The email was short and direct. David wanted to meet with Ray. He wanted to talk about recording an album. A real album. With professional studios and distribution and everything Ray had once dreamed about. Ray read the email 5 times to make sure he wasn't imagining it. He showed it to Chloe that night. She screamed so loud the neighbors probably heard. "Dad, this is it," she said, grabbing his hands. "This is your second chance. You have to take it." Ray wanted to believe her. But part of him was still scared. What if it was too late? What if he wasn't good enough? What if he had already missed his window? Before he could make a decision, the situation at work got even worse. Mr. Vernon called an emergency meeting with the board of directors. Ray wasn't there, of course. But Linda told him what happened. The board was furious. Not at Ray. At Mr. Vernon. The viral video had become a public relations nightmare for the company. Shareholders were complaining. Customers were threatening to boycott. The CEO, who was supposed to represent their brand, had been exposed as a petty bully who humiliated his own employees for entertainment. The board gave Mr. Vernon a warning. Clean up this mess, fix your image, or face the consequences. But Mr. Vernon didn't listen. He was too proud. Too stubborn. He believed he was untouchable. After all, he had built this company from the ground up. Who were they to tell him what to do? He doubled down on making Ray's life difficult. More bad shifts. More unfair write-ups. He even started spreading rumors that Ray had staged the whole thing for attention. It was a desperate move. And it backfired completely. Because someone on the board had been watching closely. Someone who had seen enough. The next morning, Mr. Vernon received a message that changed everything. He was being called into an emergency board meeting. Attendance was mandatory. And this time, they weren't asking for explanations. They were demanding his resignation. Ray didn't know any of this yet. He was at home, staring at his phone, trying to decide whether to call the music producer back. He had no idea that by the end of the week, everything he thought he knew about his life was about to change forever. The board meeting lasted less than an hour. That's all it took to end a career that had taken decades to build. Mr. Vernon walked into that conference room thinking he could talk his way out of anything. He had done it before. He was a master of spinning stories, of making himself look good even when everything around him was falling apart. But this time was different. The board members didn't want to hear his excuses. They had already made up their minds. The viral video had caused too much damage. Sponsors were pulling out. Business partners were asking uncomfortable questions. The company's reputation was sinking. And it was all because of one man's ego. They gave Mr. Vernon two choices. He could resign quietly and keep some of his dignity. Or he could be fired publicly and lose everything. He chose to resign. The announcement came out the next morning. A short press release. Professional language. Something about pursuing new opportunities and spending more time with family. The usual corporate speak that everyone knew was just a polite way of saying he got pushed out. Ray heard the news from Linda. She called him before his shift with excitement bursting through her voice. "He's gone, Ray. Mr. Vernon is gone. They made him resign last night." Ray sat down slowly. He didn't know how to feel. Part of him was relieved. The man who had tried to destroy him was finally facing consequences. But another part of him felt strangely empty. He had never wanted any of this. He just wanted to play piano. "What happens now?" he asked. "I don't know," Linda admitted. "But things are going to change around here. I can feel it." She was right. The company appointed a new CEO within a week. Her name was Patricia, and she had been on the board for years. She was different from Mr. Vernon in every way. Calm, instead of arrogant. Kind, instead of cruel. She believed that a company was only as good as the people who worked there. All the people. Not just the ones in expensive suits. One of the first things Patricia did was call Ray into her office. He was nervous walking up to the executive floor. The last time he had been summoned like this, it ended with him being humiliated in front of 500 people. But this time felt different. The energy in the building had shifted. People were smiling more, talking more. It was like a dark cloud had finally lifted. Patricia's office was warm and welcoming. She had plants on the windowsill and photos of her family on the desk. She stood up when Ray walked in and shook his hand like he was an equal. "Please, sit down," she said. "I've been wanting to meet you." Ray sat across from her, still unsure what to expect. Patricia smiled. "I watched your video. Probably a dozen times by now. You have an incredible gift, Ray. The kind of talent that most people only dream about." Ray didn't know what to say, so he just nodded. "I also know what Mr. Vernon put you through," she continued. "The schedule changes. The write-ups. All of it. I want you to know that behavior will never be tolerated under my leadership. I'm truly sorry for what happened to you." Ray felt a lump forming in his throat. No one from the company had ever apologized to him before. Not once in 12 years. Patricia leaned forward. "I have a proposal for you. I know you've been approached by some people in the music industry. And I think you should absolutely pursue that if it's what you want. But I'd also like to offer you something here." She explained her idea. The company was starting a new employee wellness program. They wanted to bring in activities that would help people relax and connect with each other. Music was going to be a big part of it. Patricia wanted Ray to lead the program. Not as a janitor. As the company's first artist in residence. He would teach piano workshops, organize performances, help employees discover their own creative sides. "You wouldn't have to choose between this and your music career," she said. "You could do both. Part-time here, And the rest of your time doing whatever you want. Recording. Performing. Living. Your dream. Ray was speechless. A month ago, he was invisible. Now he was being offered a position that didn't even exist before he came along. "Can I think about it?" he asked. Patricia nodded. "Take all the time you need." That night, Ray sat down with Chloe and told her everything. The job offer. The recording contract that was still waiting for his answer. All the possibilities that had suddenly appeared out of nowhere. Chloe listened carefully. When he finished, she asked him one simple question. "Dad, what do you want?" Ray thought about it for a long time. What did he want? For so many years, he had only focused on what Chloe needed, what the bills required, what life demanded. He had forgotten how to ask himself what he actually wanted. "I want to play music," he said finally. "I want to share it with people. And I want to be there for you. That's all I've ever wanted. I want to play music. That's all I've ever wanted." Chloe smiled. "Then do it. Do all of it." So he did. Ray called the music producer the next day and accepted the offer. They set up a meeting to discuss the album. It would take time. Recording sessions. Mixing. All the technical stuff Ray didn't fully understand. But for the first time in his life, he had people who believed in him. People who wanted to help him succeed. He also accepted Patricia's offer. 2 days a week at the company. Teaching and performing. The rest of his time belonged to his music. The first workshop was held in the same conference room where Ray had discovered that dusty piano. The same room where his whole journey began. 20 employees showed up. Some had never touched a piano before. Others hadn't played since childhood. Ray taught them the basics, showed them simple melodies, watched their faces light up when they played their first notes. It reminded him of why he fell in love with music in the first place. Not for fame, not for money, but for the joy of creating something beautiful and sharing it with others. Months passed. Ray's album came out to critical acclaim. It wasn't a massive commercial hit, but it didn't need to be. People who heard it were moved by it. Critics called it honest and heartfelt. Some said it was the most emotional piano album they had heard in years. Ray did a few interviews, told his story, talked about Grace and Chloe and all the years of sacrifice. He never badmouthed Mr. Vernon by name. He didn't need to. The truth had already spoken for itself. As for Mr. Vernon, he disappeared from public life. Some said he moved to another city. Others said he started a small business somewhere far away. Ray didn't keep track. That chapter was closed. 1 year after the talent show, the company held another event. This time, it was different. It was a celebration of the new wellness program. Employees performed songs they had written, played instruments they had learned, shared talents they had been hiding for years. Ray was asked to close the show. He walked onto the stage and sat down at the grand piano. The same piano that had changed his life. The audience was full of familiar faces. Co-workers, friends, people who had once walked past him without a second glance but now greeted him by name. And in the front row, right where she belonged, sat Chloe. She was a college freshman now. Confident, happy, proud of the father who had given up everything for her and somehow still found his way back to his dreams. Ray looked at her and smiled. Then he placed his fingers on the keys and began to play. The lullaby filled the room once more. But this time, it wasn't sad. It wasn't heavy with grief or regret. It was full of hope, full of gratitude, full of everything Ray had learned over the past year. That some dreams don't die, they just wait. They wait for the right moment, the right stage, the right reason to come back to life. And when that moment finally comes, nothing in the world can stop them. The music ended, the applause began. Ray stood up and took a bow. He wasn't invisible anymore. He never would be again.